Psalm 77, to the chief musician, to Jeduthun, a psalm of Asaph. Jeduthun, it's in Psalm 39 as well. Jeduthun was one of the chief musicians. First Chronicles 16:41 and 25. Second Chronicles 5:12. It's also called a seer. Second Chronicles 35:15. And it's a psalm of Asaph, but it's to Jeduthun, but it's a psalm of Asaph. So Asaph is the writer, and Asaph, he is one of the worship leaders in charge of worship, but we read here in this psalm that he is discouraged. He's one of the guys that is supposed to be encouraging others, leading others in praise and worship and celebration, and he's the one who's discouraged. A lot of times, worship leaders, they're in danger of, they fight against discouragement, probably harder than most, because they're in that leadership position, and the enemy would like nothing more than to discourage the leaders of the worship. And so that's the case here with Asaph, but the psalm begins with sighing, the discouragement part in the first 9 verses, and then beginning with verse 10, it changes to singing. And so sighing and then singing. So here we go. I cry out to God with my voice, even unto God with my voice, and he will hear me. So there's this repetition for emphasis. And then verse 2, in the day of my trouble, I sought the Lord. My hand reached out in the night and ceased not. My soul refused to be comforted. So sometimes there is no solution. Some of the things that we face are so difficult, and we don't have to ignore reality, ignore what's actually happening. We can acknowledge that it's just very difficult, but the Lord is going to bring us through. It's going to sometimes carry us. So can spiritual people be discouraged? It's a good question, isn't it? Because joy is a fruit of the Spirit. So if you're a spiritual person, you're going to be filled with the Spirit and have joy, right? Well, can spiritual people be discouraged? Well, first of all, you have to consider how joy is something. Joy isn't necessarily, happiness in the moment. Joy is something that is deeper and abiding, and regardless of the circumstances, we can still have this welling up within us. However, sometimes even people who are spiritual can get down, and it's nice to have people in your life that can help you at times like those, can encourage you, give you a little bit of help. That's why it's so important. If you're thinking of getting married, it is so important to marry someone who loves the Lord and who lives for him. Because when you get down, it's nice to have someone else that can lift you back up, and if they don't know the Lord, they can't. Not in the same way that a believer can. So it's also good to develop a theology of wellness in the times when you are well, so that you can use that during the times of discouragement. Don't wait until you're fighting discouragement to develop a Bible study about encouragement and guarding against discouragement. Do that stuff during the times of wellness. It's like developing a fire plan for your building. You develop a fire plan before there's a fire. You don't wait till there's a fire. So in a similar way, we need to put in place things in our lives, in our thinking, in our theology, during the times that are smooth and good, and they will help us during times that are rough and hard. Okay, so verse 3. I remembered God and was troubled. I groaned, and my spirit was faint. Selah. Only God can truly comfort us. And not money, friends, but the Lord. He sure can. And the Lord is strong even when we are not. And keep in mind, groaning is not a spiritual gift, but it's something that God's people experience. Verse 4, you hold my eyes open. I am so troubled that I cannot sleep. So he's losing sleep over this. And, a lack of sleep can contribute to the problem. It can actually be a problem. And sometimes a good night's sleep will help. You wake up, you feel refreshed, and you can see things from a different perspective, perhaps. And then verse 5, I have considered the days of old, the years of ancient times. It's good to think about what the Lord has done in the past. It gives us confidence and encouragement regarding the future. And then verse 6, I call to remembrance my song in the night. I meditate in my own heart, and my spirit made diligent search. So sometimes there are no simple solutions, and the old customs don't work, and we need fresh encounters with the Lord. We need to develop new things appropriate to the new circumstances. The general principles remain the same, but we need to face new circumstances in life, and we need that new, fresh experience and encouragement from the Lord. And verse 7, will the Lord cast off forever? And will he be favorable no more? Rhetorical questions. The answer is no, and Asaph knows that as he's writing this. But sometimes it seems that way. But we know that's not the case. Has his mercy vanished forever? Does his promise fail for the coming generations? And no, his promise has not failed. And again, Asaph knows that, and these are rhetorical questions. For emphasis, there's one right after another. And then verse 9, has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he withheld his tender mercies in anger? Selah. So it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask God questions. Go ahead. He can take it. And there are usually very good answers. But then again, some things in life don't seem to have an answer. And you just have to accept that the Lord is in control. He knows what's going on. He still loves you. He still cares very much, about the details of your life. And you need to trust him with that. Lean not to your own understanding. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, 6. Verse 10. Now verses 10 through 20 is singing to the Lord. Verse 10, and I said, this is my anguish, but I will recall the years of the right hand of the Most High. The right hand, that's the hand of blessing. I will think about the times of blessing with the Lord. That's what he's saying. And we know the Lord because of revelation, because he has made things known. He has made himself known to us, his people. And regarding revelation, over 25% of the Bible is predictive prophecy. It is important in the thinking of God and the purpose and plan, and also the revelation of God, the Bible. And we need to not just acknowledge it, but be diligently studying, pursuing it, seeking to understand what the Lord would have us to know. And God remembers, and we can remember as well. Remember Christ crucified, 2 Timothy 2:8. Remember how he has blessed us. Remember how he has blessed you in the past, and it gives us confidence regarding the future. Now, when we read Most High, that's the word Elyon. Now, verse 11, I will remember the works of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. So think about what the Lord has done. And right now, Asaph has shifted to where he's addressing the Lord, talking straight to God now. I will also meditate about all your works and talk about what you have done. So he uses these 4 synonyms for the works of God. And then we have remember in verse 10, but also we can relate to this, verse 12, and tell others about it. Then verse 13, your way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Who is so great a God as our God? So the answer is no one. I mean, there is no other God. He's it, and he's awesome. And when we think about who the Lord is and what he has done, it's encouraging. No matter what's going on in our lives, it's encouraging to consider. And so when he mentions the sanctuary, it's the same as his holiness. Power is demonstrated in the context of his holiness and covenant. And then verse 14, you are the God who does wonders. You have displayed your strength among the nations. So these are things of the Lord, and they are awesome, such as weather, severe weather, and so on, earthquakes, how the Lord has fought on behalf of Israel, and so on, how his power has been manifested in observable and obvious ways. Then verse 15, with your arm you have redeemed your people, the son of Jacob and Joseph, or the sons of Jacob and Joseph, Joseph being Jacob's son, of course. And then Selah. Israel is God's people, and in this context we keep that in mind. They're unique among the different ethnicities in the world, and they are still Israel. The church doesn't take over for Israel, as some people teach. Israel is Israel. Then verse 16, the waters saw you, O God, the waters saw you, and they were afraid. The depths also were shaken. The Lord rules the sea and the land. Both Yam and Baal are false and nothing. It's the Lord who created the heavens and the earth. He rules the earth and the sea. And then verse 17, the clouds poured out water, the skies sent forth a sound, your arrows also went abroad. So the language is of severe weather, thunder and lightning, and so on. And severe weather, it tends to get people's attention. It really is, it can be very impressive. You're shaken with the sound of thunder and so on. And then verse 18, the voice of your thunder was in the heavens, the lightning lightened the world, the earth trembled and shook. So he elaborates the previous verse regarding thunder and lightning. And this is impressive to anyone, to everyone, from ancient times up until today. And your way is in the sea, your path in the great waters, your footsteps are not known. So his way is in the sanctuary, but his way is through his creation as well. And you're not going to see his footprints. If you want to see the footprints of God, you look up, not down. And you can see his fingerprints everywhere, but his footprints nowhere, because the Lord rules and reigns, and he's the creator. Again, not Yam or Baal. And then verse 20, you led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. This is a reference to the parting of the waters in the book of Exodus. In times of discouragement, it's good to remember what the Lord has done and go back to the parting of the waters. Just think of how the Lord parted the Red Sea and his people went through on dry ground. And then think of some of the other things, the displays of God's power in history. And then think of the resurrection. That is the pinnacle of the human story. The resurrection. Jesus is raised. He is risen indeed. And so that's such a wonderful defense against discouragement, is to remember what the Lord has done. Discouragement is a real danger, even for the people of God. You know, they say that Spurgeon, and Abraham Lincoln, for that matter, I was reading that recently, that Abraham Lincoln suffered from discouragement. But so did Spurgeon, the famous preacher. And you know, a lot of things can threaten our sense of well-being and cause us to be discouraged. Major life changes, for example, are very unsettling. They affect you more than you realize. And some typical things to do is get some sleep. Make sure you have a good night's sleep. Get some fresh air. Get the blood circulating and breathe deeply, the fresh air. And then also godly fellowship is so important. If you have been out of fellowship with the Lord and the Lord's people, well, no wonder you're discouraged. You know, you got to get among God's people where the Lord can speak through people to your heart. And if you think, well, I'm not going to do that, well, enjoy your discouragement, because you are not going to be healthy unless you are together with God's people, because that's how we were designed. That's how the Lord intended for us to be. We're not the federation of Christ, but the body of Christ. Okay, and then also, and finally, remember the past. Remember what the Lord has done in the history of his people, but also in your life. What has the Lord done? Remember that. Think about it. It'll give you encouragement. Remembering the past gives us encouragement for the future. Okay, so this is Psalm 77.